in our church. But he also pulled off the magic of burning my house down. I was 13 years old.
Wow.
So,
What?
Yeah.
Accident or
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't an accident.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll skip it.
Yeah. No. I have no problem talking about it. I think that most people, for whatever reason, get into relationships for all the wrong reasons, and next thing you do is you wake up and you're married in a loveless marriage with kids that you don't want to deal with, in a job that you hate, and if you're just that crazy enough, there you go.
Snapped.
Oh, yeah.
And again,
Were you guys home when the fire happened?
No, I was in school. I was in school.
So he didn't try to kill you.
He didn't try to kill us.
He
Burned the house down. It
Wow.
was,
So rough.
talking to my psychologist.
It's awful.
It's awful. Talking to my psychologist about how awful it was. You also that's where you really start getting into what would motivate that, and then it really has to come down to self-hatred, right?
Yeah.
Because the psychology behind burning your house down, is
So Jason Blair of the New York Times, when he wrote a book about being busted for he was a black writer who got busted for plagiarism or inventing stories or something like that back in the early 2000s, and his book where he tried to justify it was called "Burning Down My House" or something.
Right.
It was pretty famous. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a to just kind of glance over, because we only have, I guess a few 30 minutes left, is that, there came a point where, I was strung out on drugs. My mother and father got divorced when I was 13. I'm on drugs, I'm like one of the most popular rap groups in Philly. So I'm like making more money than my mom was. And, I'm out all weekend and everything like that. And, it's so far from how I was raised. And, my mom tells my dad, you need to come talk to your son, and he comes to try and have this conversation with me. And I'm like, basically, you're a piece of shit. Out of everyone coming here to have this conversation, and we had it out. And I literally told him, I was like, I will never talk to you again until you go in that house and you apologize to my mother and brother for the type of man you are. You treat me and my mother and my brother worse than any of my enemies treat me on the streets. And I'm hiring bodyguards to make sure our cash boxes don't get stolen by crackheads and drug dealers and things like that. And you have all this stuff going on in West Philly was hip hop back then. And I'm sitting there telling my father that, and you can see the look on his face was and I was like, and I'm done. And I walked, and I did not talk to him again. I didn't talk to him for 17 years. The next time I saw him, he was in his coffin.
Oh, jeez.
And it was funny because when the week that he died, and again, just you want to talk about his shame. The week that he died, I come to terms with the fact that I needed to try and make amends. It's like I can't have this type of hatred. Because ultimately, no matter how bad anyone's parent is, they didn't wake up in the morning. Most of them didn't wake up in the morning and say, how can I screw this kid up for the rest of his life? They didn't do that. It's just that they're damaged vessels themselves. And so you have to recognize that they tried to do the best they could with who they were, with what they had. And it's just if you're so damaged that that's all you're getting, then damage is what you're handing out. If you live in self-hatred, you hand out self-hatred. If you don't believe that you deserve love and you torture yourself, then externally you're going to torture someone else, and typically that's your child. And so that's where all these different forms of abuses come from, and so I had to forgive my father. And I was actually trying to go meet him to just say, this is who I am. I don't need your acceptance, but I do need to tell you that I do love you out of everything. This is not healthy. And I didn't have his number. I called my brother so he could call one of my aunts to get his number so I could talk to him and fly out to see him. And my brother calls me back 2 days later, and and my brother graduated Vanderbilt, top of his class for law. So he was a very smart guy, and he calls me up and he's like, and again, we lived in a very my brother has an immense amount of resentment still in his soul, which I love you, brother, and my Bernard, and I hope that you find peace, because of our childhood, and so he calls me up, he's like, would you believe that N-word has cancer? And I was like, what? I was like, oh, that's really weird, and So my acting coach, John Coppola, was like, "You've got to go see him. You're going to go see him this week. You're going to go see him this week." And I was like, "Okay, you're right. I got to go see him. I can't let him die." And so I was like, "Okay, Bernard, I need to know where he's at. This whole 9 yards." That day, so that he called and told me back. So that's when I go to my acting class. My acting coach told me I got to go. By the time I go home, by the time I wake up the next morning, I was going to buy my plane ticket. He calls up. He goes, "Dad died last night."
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is that during my acting class, so I was all emotional and everything like that. And so during my acting class, my acting coach Johnny had me do an exercise where another person that I was good friends with in the audience in my class, he had to sit across from me, and I had to close my eyes, get into a place where I saw my father, and open my eyes and tell him everything I wanted to tell him. And so in that class, for like 8 minutes, I just let loose on everything I would ever have wanted to tell my father, and he died that night.
Wow. Was that cathartic?
It was in a lot of ways, and then going.
So you said all that in your acting class?
Yeah, I said all that
in a theoretically fictional setting, but you were encouraged to push that
to get it out of me. To get it out of me. I hadn't at that point. I hadn't cried in over like 9-10 years.
Yeah, that's rough because I don't know why, but I hadn't cried for many years, and then suddenly the past month or so, I snapped out of a huge depression that was very devastating to me, but I still wouldn't cry on my own, and now I'm like crying at everything. I'm almost crying at this story. I'm not even kidding, but it's like I got in touch with my emotion now. My shrink's trying to analyze it, but anyway, it is rough to be cut off from emotion for some reason, and I don't know what my problem was. But
most, and by the way, thanks for sharing that. Most people have some form of emotional suppression. As males in this society, we're taught that you have to be this strong, that crying is weak, and that being, and that, look, remember when John Boehner, former Speaker of the House, he would cry, and they were like, "Oh my God, he's so weird for crying," and it's like the dude gets filled with emotion, he cries. I'm not worried about his crying, I'm worried about his policies and how he's affecting people.
Well, I don't think it was so much that he was filled with emotion that made him cry. I think he was filled with bourbon.
One of the two, right? One of the two. But we're taught that crying is weird. So if a guy cries, unless it's an actor on TV, it is you're weird about that, and so we're taught to suppress our emotions. We're taught to disassociate ourselves with one of the most important emotions, series of emotions that we as humans have, and. What is that? And so it really is important. And those are the things that I've been struggling with my entire life is how do I get in touch with my organic self? How can I show compassion to other people? If someone is preaching hatred to me, how can I show them love and compassion? Yeah. I have to hatred in myself. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to say we're going to focus, I think, on... I'm going to leave out other aspects of your life because we have about 20, 25 minutes left. So almost everything's going to be about gay-related stuff because I have so many questions.
Sure.
I'm sure Kevin doesn't...
Maybe we should do like an action round.
Like I probably will too.
Lightning round.
Here's
lightning round, yeah.
Well, here's a quick, silly question. I have some more in-depth ones, but... I'm fascinated by I think a lot of people are fascinated by what's up with James Franco. Any theories?
Well,
spill your guts.
First of all, James Franco and James, I'm talking to you right now, brother. All right, you were on my list until you started gaining weight. I was like, come on,
weight, really?
Yeah. Oh man, James, he was hot. Like he was back in early 2000s, man. James was the man, bro. I'd chain that up in the basement and fuck it all day long, right? Smack the shit out of that. But yeah, James. I think James is a great.
He's talented. I'm not talking about his talent. I'm talking about what is up with the guy. He won't fully admit that he's gay or anything, but then he does a lot of really gay themed stuff, like more than most people.
I think that
and a lot of straight sex stuff too, like Deuce.
I don't know what his sexual orientation is, but I respect him more than I do Queen Latifah in that he's willing to do that. And he doesn't care.
Is she open about? I think she has come out.
She's completely not open about it.
Oh,
and she's completely not open about it.
It's still, it's so strange that in today's day and age, that's still such an issue for people's careers.
That's my point.
Right? It's sad, but I think we're making headway.
And so
I think she's fair. If I can just interject. Well, I mean, I don't know, but I worked at a venue in the early '90s, and it was a smallish venue, but Queen Latifah was playing. She rolls up with like two huge semis, like this isn't a stadium; it's a small venue. And the house crew were all like, "Well, this is going to suck because you figure you're going to have to move shit to get the right stuff out of the car." One of the semis, the back gate opens up, the bus pulls up, she jumps out, they pull the ramp on the semi. She had a motorcycle in the back of the semi. She just goes in the truck, rides the motorcycle out, and she was gone until sound check.
Wow,
that's amazing. Yeah,
and nothing more lesbian-y than that.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to go with stereotypes.
Looking online in 2014, she was snapped sharing a kiss with a girlfriend in Italy. Strolls arm in arm with partner Ebony Nichols in New York City, so she's probably open by now.
All of her interviews, she says she doesn't want to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
But you contrast that with Whitney.
Right.
Whitney Houston had a longtime lesbian partner.
Absolutely. And you see what happened to her. Clive and those guys, from my understanding, ended up hooking up with Bobby Brown. They sent him smoking crack and killed her.
Mm.
So,
I've heard that she led him into drugs more than he led her. And I've heard that from a lot of people I trust.
I think that
he got the bad rap on that one.
There's a lot of codependency there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so... so Franco, I mean, do you have a theory though? Really,
I think he is who he is, and I think he's fluid. I'll just say fluid.
Because he says he's gay in everything but the action.
Yeah, I don't care. I think he is who he is, and he's open about it. He doesn't have any shame around it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to put a label on it, and I can understand that. You have a lot of young people, a lot of millennials right now. They're fluid or whatever. They don't want to put a label on it, and I think that's a little healthier than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a very special treat for you, James. Come on in here. He's been in the bathroom.
Absolutely, the entire time.
Let's get to the bottom of this.
I would have smelled the scent from the moment I walked into the door. I'm like a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh, that's what that is? Okay.
He's here.
Okay, well, here's something.
White
I'm just going to go here, and this is going to maybe surprise people, whatever. Okay, so I've joked for years that I'm probably the gayest straight guy in the world, and the thing is, because I love, talk about all the admittedly stereotypical things. I really love musicals. I have no problem admitting I love George Michael and music like that. I sing very flamboyantly. I vogue if I'm out at a whatever it is, proper settings, etc. So all those stereotypical things. I love theater. I love musical. So I'm just saying,
a quick question:
yes.
What is the proper location for voguing these days?
I don't know.
Come on, Carl.
I heard Vogue played in the HMS Bounty the other night. And I started moving my arms around, totally doing it, and I'm like, oh shit, I better stop.
To the point that his leather panties got a little sweaty.
Yes, wait, no, I'm just saying, for whatever reason, and nothing about gayness phases me, but yet I have I swear, I'm being honest about that. So believe me on this, I have no interest in actually engaging in gay sex with anybody, and it's not a moral thing. I just don't have. It
You're
doesn't affect
straight.
me. Yeah,
Right,
but why
fine.
would I be so into all that stuff that supposedly straight guys aren't supposed to be into?
Because you're associating a stereotype, a social stereotype, with actual human behavior.
Okay,
and that's what's so important. It's like.
And I also like talking with gay friends sometimes that are more flamboyant. I'll be like me and somebody else that is in this building, we're always talking that way. I'll be, oh, come on, you. And once if I'm just talking one-on-one, we joke around like that in the lobby.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
The building.
Listen, if you social programming, all right, dictates the way so many people believe, including Christians, including African, including people in the hood. If you're in the hood, you got to act a certain way to be cool. If you're in the church, you got to act a certain way to be accepted. If you're in a sports league, you have to act a certain way to be accepted. And so, therefore, by definition, if you are gay, you have to act a certain way so you can be identified and accepted. And it's so you start society starts dictating you to start perpetuating these stereotypes that are actually not who you are organically. How many, one of the jokes I do is in my joke about stereotype, I tell the story of this guy that I used to hang with in high school. You run into him and, he used to talk like me, if you would, and then next thing you see me, he's like, hi, Ron. And I was like, motherfucker, where'd that come? Where'd that come from? That's not who you know what I mean? Why did you, and so what part of that is your organic self? You have to ask that question,
I think we're really just talking about the movie Moonlight right now.
Well, we're just talking about me and Carl's relationship, actually.
In what way are you bringing up Moonlight? Is that just a joke, or did you have a point that I'm missing?
No, it's just one of the main themes to the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
What about like you mean like the idea? I'm really being clueless.